Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to be talking about something you probably have sitting in your refrigerator right at this very moment, but we're going to look at it through the lens of deep human history, accidental chemistry, and pure, raw survival. We're diving into how a literal prehistoric mistake created one of the most absolutely critical survival tools in human history, the accidental chemistry of the world's first cheese. So right off the bat, this brings up a pretty wild question. How on earth did spoiled milk become a survival hack? I mean, it sounds totally backwards, right? Today, if milk spoils, we immediately pour it down the drain. But long before writing, before major empires, before metal weapons were even a thing, a simple accident way back in 8000 BCE turned what should have been ruined milk into a total game changer. To get a handle on how this actually went down, let's travel back to the Neolithic era, specifically to the Fertile Crescent. Early farmers had just started to figure out how to domesticate animals like sheep and goats. So for the very first time in human history, they had this steady supply of fresh milk. But here is the catch. They had absolutely zero refrigeration. This mix of a brand new resource and super primitive technology completely set the stage for what happened next. It really all just came down to a very lucky, very specific combination. Intense environmental heat meeting fresh milk. Imagine the sweltering, brutal heat of the Fertile Crescent just beating down on these early settlements. When that extreme heat interacted with fresh milk, which was usually stored in animal skin bags or really basic clay pots, it kicked off a microscopic chain reaction that would literally alter the course of human history. Okay, so what exactly was happening inside those ancient bags? Let's quickly break down the chemistry of curds, and don't worry, we are not going to get bogged down in a bunch of complex textbook equations here. Instead, we're just going to look at the super cool basic science behind it, because honestly, while it probably seemed like absolute magic to those ancient farmers, it was just pure accidental biochemistry taking place right inside their tents. The natural recipe kicked off when that really warm weather met the fresh milk. The heat caused naturally occurring bacteria in the milk to freak out and rapidly produce lactic acid. That massive spike in acidity then caused the milk proteins to coagulate, basically clumping tightly together into solids. And pretty soon, early people figured out that they could step in and manually separate those solids from the leftover liquid. They were essentially watching the very first cheese-making process happen right before their eyes. That leftover liquid that pulls away from the coagulated proteins, that's what we call whey. These early farmers realized that if they just drained off and tossed out this watery whey, they were left with a dense, solid, spreadable curd. This wasn't just milk with a weird texture anymore. This was the birth of the very first cheese, an entirely new, human-made food created completely by accident. Now, the most absolutely crucial thing we need to understand here is why this mattered so much. You really have to wonder who the incredibly brave, or maybe just incredibly hungry, person was who first tasted those weird, sour lumps. But taking that bite changed everything for human survival. And it all comes down to the daily, brutal reality of Neolithic life, where finding reliable calories was a constant struggle. Just think about their options back then. Fresh milk was super unreliable. It spoiled ridiculously fast in the desert heat, and it had super high levels of lactose, which, believe it or not, a lot of early humans couldn't even digest. But this new, early cheese, total opposite. It was long-lasting, incredibly nutrient-dense, and crucially, had way, way lower lactose. It was essentially an ancient meal ready to eat. This happy accident became a massive famine prevention tool. It gave humans a way to sustain themselves through incredibly harsh winters when there was zero crops. It packed a huge punch of dense calories, fats, and proteins into a tiny, easily transportable package. And because of the low lactose, pretty much anyone in the tribe could eat it without getting sick. It literally hacked human survival. All right, let's zoom out a bit. Let's look at how this crazy survival hack scaled up over time. We're going from lucky mistake made by shepherds to a logistical powerhouse that fueled massive armies and medieval monks. Once humanity figured out the power of this nutrient-dense, storable food, they absolutely ran with it across the globe. Fast forward a few thousand years, right into the height of the Roman Empire. The Roman military was a logistical marvel, and they relied super heavily on something called caseus artus. This was a rock-hard cheese issued as standard military rations to the soldiers out guarding the very edges of the imperial borders. It didn't spoil, it was packed with protein, and it kept the legions marching. To really put the sheer scale of this into perspective, just think about this number, 500,000. That ancient Neolithic recipe, born from literally spoiled milk in the desert, was eventually being mass-produced on such an insane scale that it was sustaining 500,000 Roman soldiers at a time. It was the literal fuel of a sprawling ancient empire. And the story definitely doesn't end when Rome fell. The legacy of cheese continued deep into the Middle Ages. You had medieval Benedictine monks taking this basic, hardcore military ration and spending centuries perfecting it. They applied careful patience and craft to create gourmet varieties like Parmesan and Roquefort. They took ancient survival curds and elevated them into absolute culinary art. Looking at this timeline, it is just mind-blowing to trace the journey. From an 8000 BCE accident in the Fertile Crescent, to an imperial staple feeding Roman border guards, all the way to medieval monks shaping it into the gourmet culture we know today. It's an incredible story of human discovery, pure utility, and total refinement. So all of this leaves us with one final question. Will you ever look at a slice of cheese the exact same way again? Honestly, I really hope not. The next time you open your fridge, remember, you aren't just looking at a midnight snack. You're looking at a 10,000-year-old survival tool. A brilliant, accidental mistake that kept early farmers alive, fueled empires, inspired monks, and quite literally helped build the modern world.